It is your boy Protein Man back at it. Today, I'm going to do a tutorial on how to understand proteins because they're very confusing. You can tell by the sound of my voice, I'm pretty cool in school, and it's because I know how to work the proteins. It's because I know how to make a move, okay? So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a great time. So I'm going to Google images to give visual aids as to what I'm talking about, so that will simplify it. And I'm going to Let's talk about how I think of proteins to make it simpler to understand. So, first of all, what is a protein? The reason proteins are confusing, first of all, let's just get this out of the way, is because when you're learning about proteins, you're hearing about how they have like 1,000 functions. Like some are part of the cell membrane, some are becoming enzymes and controlling reactions in the cell. It's very confusing because it's like, why are they both called proteins then? And how I want you to think of proteins is proteins are equal to organs. Now let me explain. When you think of organs, you think of things like the heart, the lungs, etc. But the reason that they're organs isn't because of the function, because what do lungs do? They're very different from the heart, right? They take oxygen in and they take CO2 out. Well, the heart pumps blood. It's very different, even though they're both called organs. The reason organs are organs is because of what they're made of. Organs are made of tissues that come together to form organs. So that's the same with proteins. Proteins are proteins because they are made of strands of amino acids. So if tissues are the building blocks of organs, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. So you need strands of amino acids to make proteins. Strands of amino acids come together to form a protein. So what is an amino acid? How does it become a strand? And how do these strands come together to make proteins? So an amino acid has 3 parts. 2 of these parts are the same on every amino acid. They're like the default parts that make it an amino acid. And then there's a third part that gives it its speciality. And so let's first talk about the 2 parts that are the same on every amino acid. So you have 2 groups. They're called the carboxyl group and the amino group. So the carboxyl group is made up of a carbon atom, 2 oxygen atoms, and a hydrogen atom. And so let's just do this. So every amino acid has a carbon atom and 2 oxygen atoms and a hydrogen atom on one side. Is there a better picture than these? Oh, here we go. Didn't like any of the friends they were showing us. So this is the carboxyl group. It has a carbon atom, 2 oxygen, and a hydrogen. So this will be the same on every amino acid. Every amino acid will have one side that is a carboxyl group, and on the other side we have what is called the amino group. And an amino group has an N and 2 H's, a nitrogen atom and 2 hydrogen atoms, which are these 2 little guys, and then the nitrogen atom. So every amino acid will have this side and this side, these 2 groups, exact same atoms, same form. But then there's a third group called the R. It's called the R group, and it's different. There's 20 different things that could be here, so there's 20 different kinds of amino acids, and we're just not even going to get into that. So we now know what an amino acid is made up of. It's Ku and N, and then And so now we know what amino acid is, and we know what a protein is. How do amino acids come together to become strands, and how do those strands come together to make proteins? That process of how amino acids become strands and how they become proteins is called protein synthesis, which I have right here. Protein synthesis is the process of how a cell makes a protein. So how this all starts is in the DNA. So this isn't confusing, I swear. Just please trust me. It's kind of a mess. I actually wonder if I have a better photo. Ah, yes. Victory. Yeah, it's never going to load, so we're just not going to deal with it. So right here, we have DNA. DNA, this is the parts that make DNA are it has 2 helixes, which are these, and these are made of the same thing. They're made of a sugar called deoxyribose. That's why DNA is called DNA. The D stands for deoxyribose, and that's the sugar that the helix is made of. And then the sugar has these things called nucleotides that are on it, and these like little pegs. And there's 2 sides of DNA, so there's nucleotides that are attached to one side and nucleotides that are attached to the other. And these nucleotides are attracted to each other. So the green is attracted to yellow, yellow is attracted to green, and then there's purple and blue. And so DNA, when a cell is trying to make a protein, what happens is the DNA will actually unzip. And it looks exactly like what it sounds. Just look it up. Let's go to homages. Let's find a pretty dink one. Where are they at? So this is like these are the nucleotides I was talking about. One side of the deoxyribose sugar base has these ones, and they are attracted to the ones on the other side. When it unzips, though, basically there's nucleotides that are floating around in the nucleus of the cell, and when this unzips, they become attracted to the nucleotide on one side of the DNA. And when they are attracted to it and they start forming, they basically make a similar chain to this side of the DNA, and it basically copies this side, but it's RNA because this is it's the sugar, it's a different sugar, and it's called ribose, and so there's a different backbone, and it only has one backbone, so it kind of looks like what DNA looks like when it's unzipped on one side. So if we look at RNA, just add that to it. As you can see, oh wow, there's a lot here. That is terrible. Fire that man. Here we go. These are RNAs, and they're basically forming, and they kind of look like this, except they're a lot smaller. And they are basically nucleotides that are floating around, and they're attracted to the nucleotides on the DNA. And so they copy the information, and once they're done forming the chain, they detach from the DNA, leave the nucleus, and the DNA zips back up to normal. And that RNA strand that copied the DNA carries that information to a special place in the cell where proteins are formed, and the special place that proteins are formed is called the ribosome. And the ribosome, think of it as the protein factory. On diagrams, ribosomes are these little small things. There's a bunch of them in cells, and what happens is, let's look up RNA. The RNA travels to the, is there a simpler picture? Oh my days. Oh yeah, here we go. The RNA, which has like those nucleotides I talked about that it copied, go into the ribosome, and it tells the ribosome what amino acids to make and in what order, because there's a special order, because they have to be in the order that these nucleotides are in. So there's an amino acid that corresponds with this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and up here, the amino acid, as you can see, it's producing, this thing is called a peptide, and that's because amino acids, when they're linked together, that chain in the middle is called peptide bonds. So this peptide is actually an amino acid chain, so just, cross that word out. And so this is an amino acid chain forming, and a bunch of these come together to make a protein. So this RNA goes in, tells the ribosome what chain and what order to put the amino acids in that chain together in, and this comes out, and this process is repeated until there's enough chains to make the protein that it's trying to make. Look at amino acid chains. Like here you have this is these are amino acids, and then there's a little chain in the middle that's the peptide bond, and they're all together. So this is like an amino acid chain that just came out of a ribosome. And this is very complicated, but basically each of these colors represent an amino acid chain, and a bunch of chains come together to form a protein, which has a very complex structure. It looks like this. It's not very cool looking. And so that is the basics on how proteins are formed. It's pretty neat, pretty neato. I like to bring this up at conversations, at tables, and at parties. Here we go. Here's a pretty good thing. Amino acids, they're all kind of separate, and the ribosome puts them into a chain, and then there's a bunch of chains that come together, and they kind of fold into each other and make a protein. Very well done.